Our chapter is dedicated towards the Midwest. I'm Kareem. Along with me is Ali, Sam, Katie, John, and Chris. We're going to go over the six main factors or key messages from this chapter. Those are agriculture, forestry, biodiversity, and ecosystems, human health, transportation, infrastructure, and vulnerability and adaptation. So moving on to our first topic that we'll be discussing is agriculture. The Midwest is known nationally as one of the main production areas of agriculture. Through food and animal feed for national consumption, as well as international trade, agriculture is prominent in the Midwest. Climate change is playing a massive role in diminishing the effectiveness of, and practices of agriculture in the area. So going on to the two main factors that are affecting agriculture in the Midwest are the changes in precipitation that are due to an increase in droughts during the spring season and the increase in extreme temperatures that can be proved to be fatal for the production of commodity crops such as corn and soybean. So our first topic that we're going to talk about is precipitation patterns. This is the increase in humidity and droughts during the spring season that is resulting in precipitation becoming more intense and voluptuous during the summer seasons. This will increase soil erosion potential as well as resulting in waterlogged soil, which drastically reduces plant efficiency. An example of this occurring is the Cedar River Basin in Iowa, which is expected to increase its flooding probability by 3% through the 21st century. Trends like these will result in an increase in flooded agricultural land. Moving on to the next topic, which is temperature patterns. These are also changing, and these patterns projected for commodity crops such as corn and soybean indicate that they will rise in maximum extreme temperatures from the northern to southern parts of the Midwest. This will result in temperatures being more favorable towards failure of reproduction than to optimum growth, limiting the capability and commodity of these crops. So in terms of recommendations, these include enacting more sustainable agricultural management strategies to reduce impact of both rainfall and extreme temperatures. Utilizing soil erosion suppression methods can address rainfall by lowering soil erosion and sediment loss. Increasing diversity of planting dates and pollination periods to earlier parts of the season, as well as adjusting chemical use, can play a massive role in preserving the Midwest's agricultural efficiency. Moving on to the next topic.
The next key message is about forestry. The Midwest forests are being directly impacted by climate change. Climate change is causing rise in growing season temperatures, which increase the vapor pressure deficit and change precipitation patterns. Climate change is also producing warmer winters, which allows better survival conditions for pests and pathogens. Overall climate changing conditions, like increasing temperatures and atmospheric carbon dioxide concentrations, are also evident in the region. As shown in the figure on the right, increases in vapor pressure deficit can lead to drier plants and soils. The impacts of climate change are leading to negative effects for the forests of the region. The rising growing season temperatures, along with changing vapor pressure deficit and precipitation patterns, can cause droughts and widespread tree mortality. The warmer winters with better conditions for pests and pathogens can allow an intensified impact from these pests and pathogens. The changing climate conditions, like increasing temperatures and carbon dioxide concentrations, are favorable for invasive plant and tree species. As shown in the figure on the right, changing climate conditions like temperature and carbon dioxide concentrations will impact the forest types present in the Midwest. One recommendation to counteract the negative effects of climate change on Midwestern forests is to increase the diversity of tree species and the structural complexity of forests through forest management actions, with the goal of achieving forests like the two images in the red box in the figure on the right, where there are trees of different sizes, species, and ages present, allowing for more resilient forests. A second recommendation is to increase the populations of tree and plant species which are better suited for climate conditions in the Midwest. This will allow for a lower risk of widespread tree mortality. Moving on to the next key message.
So now I'll talk a little bit about biodiversity and ecosystems and the effect of climate change. So overall, we've been seeing increased air and water temperatures, as well as land conversion and increased stress from pollution. And so all of these have led to reduced biodiversity, loss of species, and degradation of ecosystems, which is reducing essential ecosystem services such as flood control, water purification, and crop pollination that are essential for both the environment and for humans around them. And so these current changes are negatively impacting these ecosystems and causing damage all around. So some of the specific changes that have been seen recently are species range shifts. So for example, the understory tree populations in Wisconsin have been moving from where they started off in the southern part of the state up to the northwest as temperatures increase and they try to get back to where they're the native temperature range that they're adapted to. In addition, there are changes in population size, shifts in body size, and changes in the timing of seasonal events. So for example, the seasonal greening up that's going on right now is happening earlier and earlier each year, as well as the arrival of migratory birds. But the greening up is happening at a faster rate than the birds are able to migrate. And so this causes problems for the birds year after year, as they're not arriving at the right times to get access to the foods that they've migrated for. So I'll also talk a little bit about aquatic ecosystems. So as a result of increased temperatures, there are lower dissolved oxygen levels in the water, which leaves a smaller habitable range for the fish in the lakes and overall causes problems for their population. In the Great Lakes, especially, the increased water temperature and reduced ice cover is disrupting the destratification, which is where the water turns over each year in the fall and the spring and mixes the nutrients from the bottom up with the oxygen in the surface, and provides essential nutrients and oxygen for all of the species that live there. Another problem is agricultural runoff, which causes algae blooms in the lakes, resulting in fish die-offs and other ecosystem damage, as well as invasive species like sea lampreys, alewives, and quagga mussels that are disrupting the native species that live there. So some recommendations to address all of these issues start with ecosystem-based adaptation solutions. And so what this means is based on the natural functions of the ecosystems and using those to support and protect the environment from the climate change. So for example, wetlands will naturally absorb water slowly and protect the area from floods, and tree cover can increase shade and air quality. And so different factors like these can be supported and applied to help protect the environment.
Right now for human health in the Midwest. The three main components of air quality contamination are ground level ozone, particulate matter, and pollen. Increased ground level ozone and particulate matter cause various lung and cardiovascular diseases. These could lead to missed school and work days, hospitalization, and even premature death. With pollen season starting earlier and lasting longer, people with respiratory disease like asthma are very vulnerable to allergies. One of the main contributors to pollen in the Midwest is oak pollen. And increased temperatures can cause heat-related diseases like dehydration and heat stroke or death in the Midwest. It's estimated that there are going to be an increase in over 100-degree days in Chicago a year. And the Midwest is the highest projected increase in temperatures compared to anywhere else in the United States. Now, flooding can cause mental stress that can lead to fatigue, anxiety, depression, and PTSD. And pathogens can contaminate drinking water for many of the Midwestern communities that use wells as their drinking source. And droughts can also cause mental stress, especially for farmers whose livelihood depends on their crops growing. Now, mosquitoes can carry West Nile virus and ticks can carry Lyme disease, and both of these are deadly diseases if they're not treated. Also, harmful algae blooms can contaminate drinking water or recreational water. And this can cause skin and eye irritation, respiratory illness, gastrointestinal illness, and liver and kidney damage. And this happened in Lake Erie in 2019, where the algae produced a toxin called microcystin.
Now for transportation infrastructure. One of the biggest effects of climate change is the increase in precipitation. In terms of the sewers, overflow can cause damage to properties, as well as they can mix with raw sewage and contaminate water sources, such as the Mississippi River and the Great Lakes. This causes health and ecological risks and pollutes drinking water. The EPA predicts that the updating of urban stormwater systems can cost over $480 million per year. Another effect is on transportation. Fast river flows can cause erosion of bridges. The EPA also predicts that maintaining this service to the bridges can reach over $400 million per year by 2050. As well, heavy precipitation can cause slick roadways, creating unsafe road conditions and increased travel times. This has occurred in May 17 at over 400 different roads in Missouri and several stretches of I-44. The projected cost is projected to exceed over $500 million per year by 2050. Another big effect with climate change is the increase in temperatures. Extreme heat can cause stress in the road pavements, and over a couple of years, the Constant heating and freezing of the road can cause damages, creating potholes as shown in the image below. The EPA predicts that these high temperatures due to climate change can cause over $6 billion in additional road maintenance and $1 billion in rail transportation per year by 2090. Our recommendations are to start implementing more green infrastructure, which are plant and open spaces that soak up overflowed stormwater, as well as preserving wetlands, which can also store stormwater. Some green infrastructure examples include some green infrastructure in the Pilsen neighborhood of Chicago, in which they reduce over 80% of stormwater, and a stream restoration in which they remove concrete waterway linings in waterways to reduce storm runoff and enhance biodiversity.
So pretty much the last part is the vulnerability and adaptations. The three things that are affected would be like human systems, rural and urban cities, and tribes. And the way they're affected is by increased temperatures, increased precipitation, and increased lake water levels. And there's also heat waves and urban island effects. And as you can see in these pictures, it shows the daily average temperatures of how hot it's going to get and how often it would. And then the next part is from the heat waves, it actually also ripples onto the economy. And it said that the labor loss by 2050 is going to be 9.8 billion. And by 2090 is going to be 33 billion. And then the excess precipitation also causes flooding in major and minor cities. And Chicago right now and in the future doesn't have the greatest infrastructure. It's actually known to have lots of damage. So that's going to be worse for us. And we're also going to have the urban island effect, which pretty much says that like in cities, the temperature is actually going to be hotter than the surrounding area, which isn't good for the elderly and also people who can't change their microclimate, such as like with AC units. We can adapt by using green infrastructure so we can lower the flooding rates and all that stuff. And that's also mentioned in key message 5. And we can improve mitigation by having scholars assess the risk and the vulnerability and also creating adaptation plans. The only problem with that is that most cities don't take that action to create a plan. And the 4 that have actually implemented none of what they said. And on top of that, out of the 371 cities, only 36 of them actually have public advocates for climate action. And the last part is tribes are also affected. Tribes are affected in different ways. They have animals that they use for culture, but those could be driven out of the area due to climate change. And also they have the family sugar bush, which they use for maple syrup. So that's predicted to shift out of the territory, and which would also cause economic and cultural loss. And also due to excess flooding, it would make it really, really hard for firefighters and people to go reach them since they're in rural areas. And that pretty much sums it up. And we'll take any questions if you guys have any.